Hello and welcome to my home. Just over a year ago, my husband and I threw out everything we knew and took a massive gamble in moving our lives completely across the country. We left careers, jobs we loved, friends, family, our entire lives behind, bought a house that we hadn't even seen, and started building what we hope to be our dream family life here in the beautiful West Country in England. A year on, we found our feet, got settled in, and we're looking forward to building our dream family life together. And I want to take you along for the journey, showing all the things I make, bake, create, and exploring all that Devon has to offer. Hello, how are you? I hope you're well and that you've had a good week. There's been lots going on here in our family home this week, getting ready for winter, and we've been doing some bits in the garden, some bits in the house, so lots and lots to share with you. The reason I got out into the garden was because I had bought some of those living herbs from the supermarket. Now, I've had these multiple times in the past and they always die very, very quickly. And I've heard tell it's because they actually have multiple plants within the one pot. So if you separate them out, in theory, they should grow and thrive and continue to give you a nice crop. So considering you spend £1 to £1.50 for these living herbs in the first place, it's not a bad return if you can get it going. So the first job was to find something to put these herbs in. Now the previous owners had left lots of planters around, and one of them was this black oval planter, which just seemed to me like it might be ideal for the job. So I pulled out all the old plants and weeds, tipped out all the old soil, and then set to work. Thinking about drainage, I thought what I might do is use some of the gravel from the bottom of the garden that we're not going to be using down there because we're going to have a vegetable plot there, and line the bottom of the pot with it. So that's what I did. I started by chucking some of this gravel in the bottom of this oval pot, and then I dumped a new compost on top of it, all new fresh compost on top of it. Having done that, I started separating out the plants. This was much harder than I expected. I thought they would be clear, separate plants in the pots, but actually they weren't. The roots were all tangled. The coriander in particular had very, very fine roots that looked like sort of one almost small root per plant, which was quite a surprise. But nevertheless, I had a go at separating them out and popping them in. It was rather unceremonious. There's probably a million things I've done wrong here, and do feel free to give me any pointers in the comments. I'll gratefully receive them. The basil I had not looked after, and sadly only one plant had survived from that pot. But I've nevertheless planted it, and I've left room for other herbs as well. So one of the major jobs for me this week was pulling up the beetroot, which I have now completely given up on. We planted 2 vegetables this year for our first go at vegetable gardening. We planted carrots and we planted beetroot. The carrots, they were a learning curve. I planted them way too close together and they only grew very small, but nevertheless we got a humble crop that my son thoroughly enjoyed with his tea one night. The beetroot, however, didn't really work. Ours looked a bit more like purple carrots, which then went a very unflattering shade of grey. Having done some chatting with some friends of mine, we've come to the conclusion that perhaps they didn't have enough water. Potatoes? No, what are they? Beetroot are very, very thirsty. And so what I'm going to do this year when I plant them is I'm going to plant them in a separate bed where they can be watered, but obviously with good drainage, because no plant likes to just sit in water, and hopefully they will improve. So my first job was to pull up the old beetroot. And the leaves are really, really healthy, and I really need to find out what I can do with them so they don't go to waste. But when I was pulling them up, to my surprise, 3 of the beetroot had started to roundен a little bit. So I thought to myself, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained, and popped them into their own single pots, which have been thoroughly watered. The next task on my list was to repot a robin rose. My efforts have actually been rewarded because the rose is looking happier and healthier even just a few days later, and is actually blooming. My dad has bought my son a subscription to Kitchen Garden magazine. It's not a magazine I'm familiar with, but it comes with seeds each month and lots of advice and tips on developing your kitchen garden. So I went through the packets. The subscription started and the first issue was due to arrive in September, and it did. And it came with lots and lots of seeds. And I thought to myself, well, because it's come out in September, presumably some of these seeds you can actually plant in the autumn and you can have some overwintering vegetables. I went right through the packets, and the only one I found, well, there were two I found that would work. One was oregano, but that would have to be done inside, so I've left that for another day. And the second was spring cabbage. So I've never done spring cabbage before. And I've never grown any kind of cabbage before, so it's going to be very much an experiment. So I took my makeshift vegetable box that I'd grown my carrots and beetroot in last year, and I figured because cabbages grow mostly above ground, it wouldn't hurt too much that the box is quite shallow, because I do think the shallow box didn't help my root vegetable attempts last year. So I pulled out the beetroot, tipped out all the old compost into the flower bed, so I'll dig that in when I'm planting my bulbs next week, and put new, again I put gravel at the bottom and new compost on top, and planted very, very carefully my spring cabbages. They've said to plant them in troughs about an inch deep, but it didn't say anything about covering them up again afterwards, so I didn't. I don't know if that's the right thing to do or not, but we're going to find out. I couldn't find anything anywhere about whether you cover these things up or not. So I've just been out to the garden now, and we're about 4 days after I planted them. So I think I planted them at the weekend. Yeah, I planted them at the weekend. So about 4 days-ish later, 5 days, my efforts have been rewarded. I have the teeniest, tiniest little sprouts coming out from these cabbage seeds, these roots starting to burrow their way into the compost and get all that goodness up from there. So I'm hopeful that we might have some spring cabbages. There's something really satisfying about working in the garden. It's not anything I really had time to do in our previous life, so I'm really embracing taking those moments to get out and get in the garden. And the thought of growing our own food is very exciting, and you can achieve a lot in a small space. We, could have done very well with our carrots and beetroot had I looked after them properly. Incidentally, there's a new packet of carrot seeds, and there are 1,000 carrot seeds in this packet, and it suddenly occurred to me that means 1,000 carrots. 1,000 carrots. I'm sure that's more than we eat in a year, although my son does really like a carrot, and we do have carrots quite often. So for the sake of a packet of seeds, which have been a gift in this instance from my father, and a couple of bags of compost, you're sorted for the year. It's amazing, really amazing. Now, I've not actually been very well this week. For the last few weeks, I've had this pain in my abdomen, which has just been getting consistently worse. I'm actually quite uncomfortable while I'm sat here talking to you now, but I soldiered through. So I thought, oh, it's nothing, just keep going. But after a couple of weeks, and particularly over the weekend, it was getting really bad. So I've had to be a little bit gentle with myself. I ended up in hospital. They haven't found anything sinister, which is a good thing, but the instruction is to rest. And if any of you have been here with me for any length of time, you will know that is like telling water not to be wet. It's not something that comes easy to me. And also I have a toddler, and on a Monday, me and that toddler, we're on our own. So I needed to find something this week to do that would keep my son occupied quietly for a while without me having to crawl around on the floor and play trains. So we decided to make Play-Doh. What are we making today then, Robin?
We're going to make Play-Doh.
We're going to make Play-Doh. We're going to have some fun.
Yay!
Okay. Now, making Play-Doh is a skill I have picked up already from working in a preschool, and I think everyone should know how to make Play-Doh. It's amazing. This recipe is really simple and can be made with things that are just in your cupboard. So we're going to start with 2 cups of flour. So we're going to pour the flour in. Can you help me pour the flour? That's it, got to get it in there. Not too much. Is it full yet?
Full?
Is it full? Oh, that's full. Right, so now we need to put this in the bowl. That's it, tip it in. Well done. Okay, and then we need half a cup of salt. So we need to find half a cup.
We can open that. We can make Play-Doh.
You're going to make Play-Doh? Did you get the cakes out?
Yeah.
Have fun making Play-Doh, son.
Right, so we need half a cup of salt. That's a lot of salt, isn't it?
I want to pour salt in this.
It's not full yet. Hold on. Right, there you go. Now you can pour the salt in. That's it. Half a cup of salt. 2 tablespoons of oil next.
Ew.
1, 2.
I can have some Play-Doh.
And we're going to do some mixing. I need you to mix that all up for me. Mix it all up together. So this is gel food colouring that I got last year for Halloween. I'm just going to add a couple of drops of it to, in theory, I'm going to add a couple of drops of it. Snip end of tube with scissors. That's the instruction Mummy missed. Right, this recipe I found online said add the food colouring to the walls, but that didn't work. So we're going to add it to our dough, aren't we? Squeeze. Whoa. Okay, I think that's probably enough. Now we've got to get our hands in there and mush it up. Are you ready? Yeah? Ready? Start mushing. Mush it up. Squeeze. What is it, Robin?
It's very warm.
It's very warm. Yeah, that's because we added hot water to it. Can we take it? Why don't we take it out the bowl and see if we can, if it'll work a bit easier, putting the colour through like that. Oh, that's good, Needy. Now look, I'm going to push with my hands and pull back and push. That's it. Fold it up and push. That's a great job at kneading.
It's nice.
Your Play-Doh looks nice. Does it feel nice?
This is with my arm.
With your arm?
And my other arm.
And your other arm? Should we do handprints?
Handprints. That's a good idea.
Okay. Just put them down. Just put them down once. Ready? Push. That's it. Hands up. That's your handprint. That's Robin's handprint. Oh.
I do another handprint.
You want to do another one? You can carry on playing. I'll get you some bits to roll with as well.
I'm gonna make moon cake.
Moon cake, like Justin and Squishy.
I don't want it.
And Olive. How could I forget Olive?
That's your cupcake,
This one?
Olive.
Oh, thank you, Justin. Is this a moon cake?
It is a moon cake.
Oh, it's orange. Mmm, smells really good. What does it smell
Do you
like?
want to eat it?
I'd love to eat it. Oh, that was delicious. What does
Can I have a cake, Olive?
You'd like a cake? Okay, I'll make you a cake. I'm making you a cake. I'm making a cake. Oh, there we go. Right, I've got to put it in the oven. There it is. It's cooking. Ding. It's done. Open the oven. There's the cake. Oh, but it's not finished because you need a cherry on top. There you go. There's your cake, Robin. Oh, you're welcome. It took almost the entire tube to get this pale orangey colour in our Play-Doh, so I would definitely possibly go with ordinary liquid food colouring next time, but there we are. The only thing I did differently to this recipe to what was called for was this recipe called for glycerin, and we didn't add that at preschool, I'm sure of it, so I didn't add it this time and it's been fine. The Play-Doh itself, if you look after it, will last for 6 months or so in an airtight container. We've just popped ours in an ice cream tub and we had lots of fun making all sorts of things with our Play-Doh.
Okay, that's awesome. Cake.
Cake for me.
Yeah!
Thank you. That's a good cake.
Can you eat the cake now?
Yeah, your
Can
turn.
I eat another cake?
Another cake. Goodness me, we're going to be full of cake. We don't have any room for our lunch.
Okay. Where's my lunch?
Maybe we should make some lunch, yeah? So before the pain got really bad and I was taken ill, as I said, I kept just soldiering on. And one of the things I want to do is reduce the waste in my kitchen. Bananas we buy all the time because we always have to have them. Myself and my son both eat them, but I'm very fussy and won't eat them if there's a brown spot on them. And my son goes through phases of wanting all the bananas or suddenly not wanting any bananas, but it's not worth risking not having any bananas in the house. So having had some overripe bananas that were just going to sit there, I decided to make some banana bread and some banana muffins. Now my banana bread recipe comes from the Good Housekeeping book. I'm sure you can readily find it online. It's a banana and honey tea bread. Now I've had mixed success with this when I weigh out the ingredients. If I weigh out the bananas properly, it doesn't work. And what I've discovered is that my loaf tin is too small. It's 2 pints and it wants a 3-pint loaf tin. So what I did this time was I didn't fill it as much, the loaf tin, and I put the rest across. I put the rest across some muffin tins. Partway through baking this, my son got very upset, so I took him to give him a cuddle, and he finished up baking with me. I always find that diverting his attention to something creative does help, and especially if it's something calming like baking that we can do together. So I sat him with me and he helped pick out the cake cases. There's also been a bit more sewing this week. As I shared last week, I started making things for the preschool room that I work in. And one of the things that we needed was a drawstring bag for nursery rhymes. There are nursery rhyme soft toys. So there's a soft Humpty Dumpty, there's a soft spider, there's a sheep, there's not a soft bus, it's a toy bus for Wheels on the Bus, and there's stars for Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and the children like to dip their hand in and take out a toy, and whatever toy comes out is the song that we're going to sing in circle time at that point, and they absolutely love it. I don't quite know what happened, but we were using a box and my colleague said how nice it would be to have a bag. And I actually had a bag almost completely made from when I was making bags for the NICU a few years ago. So I got out my sewing machine one evening and got to work. I'd already done the cutting of the two fabrics and the interfacing and a little bit of the sewing together. So all I had to do in theory was cut the lining, which I wasn't going to interface, do the channels for the drawstrings, sew it together, turn it out. How difficult could it be? It turns out it was quite difficult. Because I hadn't done this in so long, I made a lot of mistakes. These drawstring bags are ones I used to make for my business and I could make them standing on my head. So rather arrogantly, I just went for it rather than looking up the pattern again. And what I started with was cutting the lining roughly to the same size. I used the outer side, the right side of the fabric as a guide and cut along there. Please, no judgment for cutting on my ironing board. It was late, I was tired, I was in pain. And it's a drawstring bag for use in a preschool. It's not an item of clothing that has to fit. So I then cut the channels for the drawstrings, but managed to cut along the fold line for one and had to sew it back together again. So there's an extra seam in one of the channels for the drawstrings. I then pinned it in place, making sure to pin the drawstring channels the right way up, sandwiched between the inner and the outer, and began sewing. The mistake I'd made is that I had forgotten to fold over the fabric to create the seam, and when I went to turn it the right way in later on, I realised that actually what I'd created is a flat piece of fabric rather than a round cylindrical bag. So I had to undo the entire thing and start all over again. I think it took me 3 attempts in total to make this bag, and I did feel a little bit silly, but less haste, more speed is the adage that comes to mind here. When creating a box bottom for a bag, it's kind of simple. All you need to do is, when you've sewn your bits of your bag together, is cut a square out of each corner at the bottom. So I went for 2 inches from the edge of the fabric, so 1.5 if you count the seam allowance in there. Then you squeeze the bits of fabric together, try and line up the seams from the side and bottom that you will get, pin or clip across, and then run a line of sewing across that. And what that does is it gives you this boxed out bottom. In terms of a drawstring, I didn't have any handy, so I took some gardening twine and crocheted a chain, which I used in the meantime in the short term. The bag went down really well. The children have apparently enjoyed using it. I've not actually been there since I handed it over. I handed it over on Friday when I went into work, but it's my non-contact day, so I was in the office for the morning doing my teach training studies, so I didn't see the children play with it. And of course I have actually been away sick from work. These instructions to rest. So as I've mentioned, I've had to rest a lot this week. And so I thought I'd show you what I have managed to do. I must admit, I've been doing a lot of sleeping. My blood pressure's been dipping quite low. I've spent a lot of the time in hospital, so there was a lot of sock knitting going on. Luckily, I really like to knit socks. I always have a sock in my bag, and for if I'm out and about, which is really helpful. Oh no. So rather sadly, I've just discovered a moth hole in one. Oh well, there might be a darning video coming up. That's a shame, because I was going to send these as a gift. Yeah, that's not happening, is it? Okay, so these socks were going to be a gift for someone. The story of them is as follows. I was vending at a fibre festival back in 2019, and my friend Jude, who had the hand-dyed yarn company Stranded Dye Works, you'll see him online now. He's got a new channel, Rewilding Jude. It's amazing. But at the time, he was dyeing yarn, and he was supporting me through my first sort of festivals, and very kindly offered to use his circular sock machine to crank tubes to produce samples of my yarn for this show. All I needed to do was put the heels and toes in. So this is what I did. So this is the tube that was cranked on his sock machine. He did a folded cuff and then crank a tube all the way down to there. And then he put some waste yarn in the bottom, which you can't see because I've put a toe in, and then cranked the next sock, finishing up with a cuff again. And actually on this one, I can show you the waste yarn that he put inside to join them up. So all I needed to do was put the heels and toes in, and cutting my yarn was really quite frightening. So he showed me exactly how to do it, bless him. And I did actually finish this sock nearly 5 years ago now, and it was a sample on my stand at the show. And this was my hand-dyed yarn colourway Aurora Borealis, which you can see is teals and blacks and purples and greys. It's really quite pretty. On the gauge for a circular sock machine, which is quite a tight gauge, it actually comes up almost self-striping, but it isn't really a self-striping yarn. What you actually get is more like what you get here, a bit more varied. Anyway, so I did that. And the other sock languished for 5 years, because we're now in 2024, and I kept losing the mini ball of yarn that I had left over to finish this with. And then the other day I found a ball of the yarn and thought, brilliant, I will do this. So I sewed the toe. I put the toe on when I was in hospital the other night. And as you can see, it's a completely different colourway, like dye lot, to the first one that Jude used all those years ago. I hadn't realised this, but never mind. And then I had to cut in to put the heel in. So you cut part way down your tube and put it in. So I will show you the process here on this video. Start by finding where you want your heel to go. I cheated and measured it against the first sock. Then work your knitting needles in one row above and one row above and one row below where you want your heel to go. Now you've got to be brave and snip it. Snip in the middle so that you've got a tail either side to weave in your ends with. Then you are ready to join on your new yarn and start knitting. Essentially what you're knitting as an afterthought heel is a toe. So I knit the first couple of rounds to give a bit more depth. And then for each needle I would knit one, slip, slip, knit, knit the last 3 stitches, knit 2 together, knit 1. I repeated that on the other side and alternated decrease rows with straight knit rows until I got to 16 stitches. And then I used the grafting stitch to put it together. And there we are. Again, being quite limited in what I can do sitting down and being comfortable. The other thing I thought I'd do was get one of my jobs out of the way. So I knit socks for my family. I knit socks for my son predominantly, my dad. I've started knitting socks for my husband. And I've knit a pair for my mum this year. Now we've got slippy floors in here, so warm woolly socks are perfect for those winter months, but they are slippy and my son does go hooning around at 1,000,000 miles an hour and more often than not slides and lands on his backside, occasionally bumps his head. So I picked up this stuff called Sock Stop from Knits and Pieces in Teignmouth near us, fabulous local yarn shop. I'm sure lots of local yarn shops near you have it. And the idea is really simple. You simply dollop bits of this sock stop onto the bottom and it dries and turns them effectively into slipper socks. So I have done 3 pairs. I'm just show you one of each. I've done 3 pairs of socks so far. With these dollops here of the sock stop, and that will mean my mum hopefully doesn't lose her step on the kitchen floor where she lives, because she's not very steady on her feet these days and she's got quite weak bones, so when she falls over it's a big deal. And my son hopefully with these little dots, they look like party socks, don't they, will be steady on his feet there as well. So that's what I've been up to this week. Most of this was in the previous week, as I said, before I started getting really ill, and I've just been spending some time on the sofa doing some gentle knitting. I've got some other bits in the works, but I'll show you those next time. My plans coming up, I need to start weatherproofing the house for winter. I've gone through all my hand knits, as you know, but we really don't want to put the heating on anytime soon. We're quite lucky in that it's quite a nice sunny balmy weather at the moment, so I'm going to be sorting out some curtains, making some curtains for the windows that don't have them, and I've also been looking into resealing my windows to stop drafts. So we've got that, and we've also got pallets out the front that we got for free that we're hoping to turn into a vegetable box ready for the spring, so that's on the cards. Do share with me what you like to do at winter, or cozy bits in your home. Are you a vegetable gardener? Have you tried growing anything before? Do you want to grow anything? Am I doing it all completely wrong? Let me know below and I will see you next time. Take care. Bye.